Welcome to day 3. I gotta say, I'd have a lot more fun doing this if it wasn't so goddamn cold outside. It's snowing again. Either way, we've made some serious progress, and today, I promise you, is going to be the last day. We already took care of the front tire. That's been changed. You saw that in the last video. Now it's time for the rear. And thankfully, I have a feeling that's going to be a little bit easier. We don't need to hold the bike up in some, teetering on the brink of disaster makeshift thing. All we need is the rear paddock stand and our tools. So let's just cut to the chase and do this. Let's check the manual. Support the motorcycle on a rear paddock stand. Place a support under the wheel that just takes up the gap without pushing upon it. And there's not much of a gap here. It's the thickness of 2 pieces of cardboard and not much else I can put in there. It's way less than like a sheet of wood or anything like that. Maybe some plywood. I don't know. We'll pretend that's good enough. Create some slack in the chain. Chapter 1. We start by loosening the axle nut. This nut is supposed to be tightened to 105 Newton meters, which means it's probably going to take at least that to open it up. We'll put it like that. Jesus. That's been slightly loosened. Next, we have to loosen this adjuster nut. Now to slacken it anti-clockwise to create some slack. So it's once, twice, 3 turns. Hopefully that'll be enough. Fuck it, we'll do 5. We want to make sure, right? So we don't have to keep redoing this. There, that's 5 times. I'm gonna write that down too so I don't forget. 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm not gonna rely on that. Obviously, I'm gonna make sure that the right tension's on the chain when I put the wheel back on, but now at least I have an estimate. Time for the main event. We're going to remove the nut and the washer and this adjuster plate. Did that do it? And of course, it's going to be very important to remember in which order these things were sitting. Let's take the axle out of the other side, and then this wheel is coming off. That's easier said than done. Is there a trick to this? Boy. I can see it's free on the other side, so the stuck is here. What the fuck do we do now? Well, I tried being nice to it, so we're gonna try being mean to it. Got myself a nice mallet, and I also got some wood screws. And this might not seem like it makes much sense. There's a hole here in the axle. If we slide this in, I'll have a surface to hit that'll still send shocks through the axle, but that won't risk damaging the axle itself. So let's try that. This took a good hour. I think I'm very lucky that it wasn't seized more than it was. I've heard of people who've had this bolt so stuck it just shears off the bearings and you have to get new ones. This one did eventually come off. Take a look at this. It's just rust. There's not one shred of lubricant on here. I don't know if this came this way from the shop that sold it to me, or if it's this way from the factory. This is terrible. Thankfully, I got some help doing this. I couldn't do it alone. We ended up having hammer on one side, screwdrivers, trying to pry it off of the other side. And eventually it worked. So, all right, let's get the show on the road. Now we disengage the chain and draw the wheel back and displace the brake caliper. It's basically done then. We're gonna take some cloth. Chain has slack. Let's just put this cloth here. Nice. And now we should be able to get the wheel out. There we go. Fucker's out. Looks good. We'll maybe clean that off a little bit. Now, we are of course going to have to apply quite a bit of brute force to this. Anyway, we don't want to put too much weight on here and break that. We don't want to put any weight on the sprocket. We really only need to muscle on one side of this tire, because the other one usually pops off pretty easily. So we're going to make it this side. I think we can get away with not removing this. First things first, we're going to take these bearings out like that and like that. And we're going to remember how they were sitting on the axle. So we're just going to slide those on there so that we have them later in their correct orientation. So it's going to be the same procedure as yesterday. Step one is going to be to get rid of the air, get rid of the valve core, and deflate the tire, and then get it off of the bead. Next, we'll spray some Windex on here. This isn't actually Windex, it's Ajax Tough on Grease. And now, for the next hour or so, I'm going to get very uncomfortable. Yesterday I figured out this pretty good idea. In order to keep track of where I've been trying to break the bead, I'll just do it once for every spoke. Now, I had this theory yesterday that this tire was actually going to be easier than the front one. It was really hard to get the front one rebeaded, and since this tire is wider, I think that's going to be easier. But on the other hand, it's also going to need more air to fill up, which might be a problem. All right, here we go. Get the bead breaker in, and bring it together. And it's very stubborn. There we go. It popped. Now we got to do the same thing on the other side. I did not realize that comes out. I meant to do that. I guess that solves our problem. We no longer have to protect that damn thing. I think we did it. It didn't pop, but it's certainly off. Oh yeah. It's now been debeaded, but I still haven't taken the tire off. And now we start the hard part. Here we go. Come on. Ah, there we go. That's the hardest part right there. That was much better. Okay. Removal done. Time for assembly. Okay, it's actually going in quite well by itself. Ah, there we go. How about that, huh? We did it. So I learned a few lessons from my disastrous attempt at refilling the tires yesterday, which took many, many attempts. One thing I learned is that the bead seats itself easier against the tire wall if it's close. So when I started filling the tire before, like the edges of the tire were right in the center of the rim, which really didn't work at all. So I went back, I took the tire, and then I smashed the shit out of it for a while to try to get the bead as far out as possible. The other thing I learned is to inflate it without the valve core. Without the valve core, the air will rush right back out. But there's also nothing limiting how much air can go in. So it can go full blast. And that'll expand it enough. And despite the fact that this tire is way larger than the front one, hopefully it'll still work. All right, let's see if that does the trick. Now, if we do manage to beat it, it's going to pop rather loudly. Okay, let's give it a shot. First attempt. Nearly there. We did it. We fucking did it. Well, what can I say? That went much, much easier than yesterday. First attempt. I think I saved myself an hour. All right, let's get back to the garage. I took the liberty of balancing the wheel and cleaning it up when you weren't looking. So now all we got to do is start reassembling this bad boy, and we're going to start with this sprocket. So the sprocket comes with all of these plastic spacers, which, according to the manual, should be placed like this. Interesting. Like that. That. I guess there's really only one way these can go on anyway. And like that. And then the sprocket goes on top. Like that. Nice. No movement. That's good. This axle has no grease on it and tons of rust. I don't know who's responsible for this, but that is not okay. So I'm going to clean it off a little bit with some steel wool and grease it up. Wow. Holy shit, that's effective. Okay, I guess it's time. So we should just lift this up and get it ready. And in you go, buddy. And then the spacer on the other side. There we go. In here. Okay, it's in. Now this guy needs to fit onto the brake like that. And then there's a rail here that it has to get to. Okay. There. And I think we're good to go. Let's apply some grease all over this thing. Let's get a good glob of it here. How's that? A little bit more maybe? I think that looks lubricated properly, don't you? All right. That is how it should look. All right, let's just put this in. That's sliding much better. These go in here. Now we gotta make sure it goes through on the other side. First things first, let's get the chain back up where it belongs. There we go. Oh no, what did I do now? How about that? Got it. Oh. We've basically done it. All that's left now is I'm going to attach this nut, and then we got to adjust the chain tension because that is way wrong right now. Excellent, and I didn't even ruin the thread on that bolt. This final part, adjusting the chain tension, is supposed to be done on the kickstand, so and the way to do this is keep a bit of forward pressure on the wheel, and then you just tighten the nuts. Now I said before that I did 5 counterclockwise turns. It was actually more like 7 because I went back and did 2 more. That's 1. 3. Now, oh yeah, the chain's tightened up a lot. Okay, now distance between the chain and here, when lightly tensioned, should be 51 to 56 millimeters. That's still too much, isn't it? Oh yeah, that's way too much slack. Too loose again. When I put the tool seriously, what the hell, where'd it go? Well, I can't find it. Luckily, this is one of the few things that I actually have a double of. Reason being that I did my first chain adjustment before I got my toolbox. So, well, I'm sure it'll turn up. we're gonna have to tighten it up a little bit more. Let's just do a quarter of a turn each side. Something like that. Yeah. All that remains is to tighten this up. So, I'm gonna fasten the lock nuts. Good.
So she says it's time that I be going on, 'cause there are better things out there for you. She says that every time I see you, I know you wish for more. And don't you waste your life away